To discuss other economic concepts as applied to the dating market, buy Hypergamy Factor. It's on sale. Dating Up, the Hypergamy Factor. You can find it on Nook from Barnes & Noble and Amazon in the Kindle versions, electronic versions, as well as paperback. Buy it today. Links are in the description. The topic of today's discussion is the information problem known as adverse selection. Adverse selection occurs as a result of information known by the seller of a product that is not known by the buyer. And the product's price is generally indicative of its value, meaning the higher the price, the more quality the product should be. Since the buyer does not know all of the information and it sees similar products, the buyer will average the prices of high and low quality products to mitigate the risk to the buyer that the buyer buys a product that is not indicative of the price. This results in offering too low of a price for a high quality product, but too high of a price for a low quality product, which the seller is happy to sell the buyer. As a result, the buyer only buys low quality products. Another way to call the adverse selection issue is called the lemons problem, and industries have emerged to mitigate this type of risk. For example, Carfax. The original lemons problem was known as the problem of receiving a car that was a big yellow clunker, i.e. a lemon. Carfax emerged in using the VIN number of the car can give you information about the history of the car, where it's been fixed, the mileage, etc. And that way the buyer can make a more informed decision on how much to pay for the car. This is also similar to the insurance company principle. Insurance companies average higher and lower risk individuals into a pool and offer a premium based on risk factors of a given individual. That way, an individual who is particularly high risk may not have to pay exactly as much as their risk is in dollars, but this is a detriment to people who are low risk and have to pay a little bit more than their risk that they put out. When it's applied to dating, the adverse selection issue can arise when you can't tell a person's quality by the way they look, i.e., you can't judge a book by its cover. The way a person presents themselves is not indicative of their value, and so people have different temperaments and habits that don't display when you first meet them. So the issue is, if the woman is looking for a person to date and they're in a market full of men, in this case, the chances of whether or not the guy is going to be an asshole is what is in question here when we're talking about information problems. Now, hypergamy magnifies this because there's already a requirement, a higher requirement for men with regards to women in order for her to begin choosing a man. This increases the chance even more that the person might be a quote-unquote asshole. And when I say asshole, I don't mean mean, but I mean like how we use the word lemon for a car that doesn't work, meaning that the woman has certain criteria aside from looks for a guy that the guy might present as if they might look a certain way, but she won't know these qualities until she actually gets with him. Like, his level of income or his status in society. While one could argue that status could be indicative of the particular location that they're frequenting, for this exercise, we're going to assume it's unknown. Now we're going to get into some definitions. SMV stands for sexual marketplace value. This is the price or value when in a market with no arbitrage that a person can get on the 10 scale. So if I'm like, hey, she's a 8 out of 10, that means her SMV is an 8. The subscript of F is for female or women, and the subscript of M is for male or for man. Lambda is a hypergamy factor, and this is a number between 0 and 1 that determines the amount of space between the differences of the male and female sexual marketplace value as a proportion to the male's value. So you can see this applied in the formula below. To get a more deeper dive on what hypergamy is and the science behind it, buy the Dating Up, the Hypergamy Factor book. Now we have some equations, which is the male's SMV is equal to L times the weight of L, M times the weight of M, and S times the weight of S, where L, M, and S are 10 scale ratings of looks, money, and status. So what we have here is we have a weighted average of 10 scale factors that when you add them up together will give you a number between 1 and 10, which will give you the man's value. And this is going to be based on how important looks, money, and status are to the woman looking at him. So for example, and all of these weights need to add up to 1. So for example, if in all, looks, money, and status are what we're judging, and the woman's looking at the man and saying, wow, he's a 7 in looks, a 10 in money, and a 5 in status. Well, how important are these to you? Well, looks is important to her 20% of the time. Money is important to her 30% of the time, so that you can logically guess that status is important 50% of the time. In our example, our woman will have an SMV of 5.6. Her hypergamy factor, or her degree of space, will be 0.8. And when we do the math, the man that she's looking for is a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10. In this example, the ideal man for this woman, the man has got to be a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10. She has an equal preference for looks, money, and status. Since this is the case, the relative important weights for looks, money, and status are all equal. So we can drop the subscript and combine like terms, and each of the weights is equal to 1/3 or 0.333 repeating ad infinitum. To indicate this, I put a star next to the last digit to indicate that it repeats indefinitely. As a result, a woman with a 5.3 who has equal preference for looks, money, and status is looking for a man with a 7 in each of those areas or higher. Giving an illustration, as we said before, a woman with a SMV of 5.6 who has an hypergamy factor of 0.8 is looking for a man who is a 7. And not just the man that's a 7, but the ideal man will be a 7 in looks, money, and status or higher. Let the 10 scale ranking in each of these attributes be separated by commas from left to right, denoting looks, money, and status. So here, this is the ideal man. He's a 7, 7, 7. So in our example, let's say the woman walks into a gathering place like a bar and sees 4 guys looking her way. They're all 7s. How does she know, just by looking at them, that they'll meet her criteria? Let's just say that she does know that at least one of them fits her criteria. How is she going to work this out? Here we enter into the realm of asymmetrical information. The men know their levels of looks, money, and status based on her criteria. And let's say that some of her friends have gone to the bar before, and the guys available to her have the following attributes regarding looks, money, and status. One guy is a 7.56, one is a 7.65, another one is a 7.66, and last, our ideal man is a 7.77. Based on her relative importance weights, we can use our earlier formula to average the scores to determine the overall SMV of the man, taking into other factors that can't be seen with the eye. Or 7.56, a 7.65, a 7.66, and a 7.77 become a 6, another 6, a 6.33 star, and a 7. Again, I put a star after the last 3 because it continues indefinitely. This is what happens when we put their looks, money, and status scores into her framework. This is what you would get if she actually got to know the guys and found out about them, what their values would be to her outside of looks. To be conservative and to mitigate her risk, what she's going to do is average these guys' sexual marketplace values and give them an average score based on the probability that she's going to find the ideal man. Now, the probability that the ideal man exists based on her criteria is 25% or 1/4. That means that there's a 3/4 chance that she's going to meet the wrong guy. So she factors that into her equation and she gives all of the guys a score of 6.33 star. Since she gave every guy a rating based on the average of all the guys, it may appear to her that there aren't any good men because none of them will fit her criteria, because she doesn't want to take the risk of getting to know one of them and they not being the one that she's looking for. And it's more likely, 75% likely, that she's going to run into the one that is not fitting her criteria. So, as a result, on the guy's point of view, it may appear she's pricing herself out of the market. And what ends up happening is the market just fails. There is no market for this type of pairing. And this is why dating services and other things that, or matchmakers and things like that, those people are the ones who bridge the asymmetrical info gap to verify so that they can avoid this type of lemons problem or adverse selection problem. And the girl in our example ended up purchasing this mug. Get one at www.okaytobecliche.com. That's okay, the number 2, the letter B, and cliche, all one word, .com. And look at our dating up section for our dating up mugs, and you can check out any of our other mugs. Also, to go deeper into how economic theory is applied to the sexual marketplace, get Dating Up the Hypergamy Factor today on Nook, in Barnes & Nobles, and at Amazon. Links are in the description box. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.